Hey, have you been hearing about turbo cancers? Turbo cancers is this term that was coined by the medical community to identify these rapidly progressing cancers. And these cancers are showing up in a much younger demographic than we've historically seen them. So they're showing up in 40s, a lot in the 30s, in the 20s, in the teens. And what makes these cancers so unique is that it can be just a matter of weeks from diagnosis until death. Now, there's a number of scientists, more and more scientists are stepping up and saying that, there's enough evidence to suggest that there's a causal link between these cancers and the mRNA vaccine. Well, you can imagine that kind of commentary kicked off a flurry of news and social media posts. And so then we had social media and the mainstream news agencies stating one thing and scientists stating another. And that once again left me wondering what's real here and what's not. So we're going to do another episode of hashtag Half Truths, where we're going to go on a journey of data forensics. I want to cover what the scientists and the doctors are saying, and then I want to compare that to what the mainstream news media is saying. And hopefully from that, you're going to get more information that can help you make better decisions for your life. And then in another episode, what I'd like to do is go over, once again, all the science that's out there and why that science might support what these doctors are saying and why these doctors probably came to that conclusion based on all the science that's been published over the last 2 years, 2.5 years. Hi, my name's Kim. I'm a licensed and nationally certified East Asian medical provider and a Taoist practitioner. You know what got me into this in the first place? It was my own health and my husband's health. We both suffered from things that could be long haulers, and then we suffered from things that could be identified as injury from the vaccines. So that's what got me into researching this, finding different methods to pull myself, my husband, and my clients back to health. And if you're curious about some of the things that we're doing in clinic, then check out my members only area, Health Hub. I identify a lot of the alternative solutions that might work for you and might help you improve your health. And hopefully there is a link to it up here. And if not, there's going to be a link at the end of the video. If it's not there, then you're going to find a link in the video description below where you can too join us on Health Hub and become a member and find new and exciting ways to help improve your health. One of the first things I had to do was identify if I even thought these turbo cancers were real. And I looked at degrees of connection. So, first degree of connection is somebody I know. Second degree of connection, it's somebody that's known by somebody I know. And then third degree of connection is that second degree and it's somebody they know. So third degree is really far away from me. And if they're in a third degree of connection, it's not that it doesn't exist. It's just that it's so far away from me that I might not experience it. But when things start showing up in my second and first degree of connections, that means that it's really much more prevalent than I could even imagine. Because think about this. There's 8 billion people on this planet. So each one of us is like this little sunflower, and everyone we know is in this sunflower. And there's billions of sunflowers on the planet. So for something to hit my circle of influence, I know LinkedIn makes it sound like your circle of influence is so big and so powerful, but when you're talking about 8 billion people, your circle of influence in the sea of sunflowers is minuscule. And when something actually comes in and hits your second and your first level or your first degree connections, then we're talking about something that's probably a lot more prevalent than we could imagine. This year, these exact descriptions of a healthy person suddenly blowing up with cancer and passing within a few weeks, that is stepping into my first and my second degree of connection. So this is really a lot more prevalent and it exists. So now I wanted to understand the truth of it all. Let's look at what some of the doctors and scientists are saying. And I'm going to give you a variety of different views so that you can kind of see what they're thinking. And you can make your decisions from that. But I'm going to start with Dr. Patel. He's an oncologist out of South Carolina. What he is saying is that since the pandemic, I'm seeing a lot more rare cancers, which is highly unusual. If I saw one, that would be unusual for the year, but I'm seeing 7. And I'm also seeing a lot more rapidly progressing breast cancers, kidney, renal cancers. And I'm not sure why that is, but because of the time frames involved, now this is Dr. Patel, it might have something to do with that COVID-19 virus. And we should study that because there might be a causal link there. And so what he wants to do is he's going to start collecting data because he wants to start to identify this population that is getting these rapidly progressing cancers. And being that he's an oncologist, he's probably in the perfect situation to be able to capture that data. And then there's Dr. Mackey, and he is the one that really, that social media and mainstream news agencies just went ballistic over. And Dr. Mackey, he's out of Canada, and he does something similar to what I do, where he does this data forensics. He does this deep data mining to see what's happening. And he accidentally ran into this. He started noticing that these young, healthy doctors in Canada were dying from rapidly progressing cancers, something that hadn't existed historically, and that this happened after the vaccinations. So he went a step further and said, because of the time involved and the population involved, that all of these had been vaccinated multiple times, and that this rapid progressing cancers have only shown up since since the pandemic, there might be a causal link between these rapidly progressing cancers and the mRNA vaccines. So that's what he's saying. But he's not the only doctor who's saying that. So there's another doctor, a professor emeritus of immunology at Harvard, a Dr. Hirsch. And he's saying also, this is really preliminary data, but it looks like there is a causal link between these mRNA vaccines and these rapidly progressing cancers, and we should study that further. Well, okay, so it's not just Dr. Hirsch who's saying that. There is another doctor, Dr. Charles Hoff, and he also is an oncologist. And he's been noticing in his practice too that the number of breast cancers, the number of prostate cancers has been jumping up, and he thinks it's very unusual and they're rapid progressing. He thinks that there might be a causal link between these rapidly progressing cancers and the mRNA vaccines, and we should study that further. Okay. I could keep on going because there's more doctors who are saying that there seems to be a causal link. What about Dr. Philip Buchholz? What about Dr. Jancy Lindsay? So all these doctors are saying that there is scientific evidence to suggest that there's a causal link between cancers and these mRNA vaccines. We should do more research. And that's how science works, right? We got a hypothesis And then we do some research to verify if that hypothesis is right. Science at its finest. Let's look at some of the mainstream news media articles and see what they were saying. And I'm going to start out with this article here. This was published by the Annenberg Public Policy Center. Now, this is part of the University of Pennsylvania. So we're talking about young writers. This writer, Kate Yandell, she's a really good writer. She is very cohesive. And what I want to do is I want to just move down a bit to here in the article where she states that there's no established link between the COVID-19 vaccines and cancer. And here's the thing. She's absolutely right, because we haven't studied that. So we don't have that link right now. And what every one of these doctors and these scientists are saying is, I would like us to study this more because we're seeing a causal link. There might be a relationship between these two things. And our hypothesis that we want to start this out with is these vaccines can cause this rapid progressing cancer. Now, I'm going to go down a little bit more here because she references a 2022 study that is looking at vaccinations for Hep A, Hep B, yellow fever, and flu. These are not the mRNA vaccines. The mRNA vaccines are a completely different technology. These vaccines do not cross the cell membrane. They are not engineered to cross the cell membrane and enter into the cell. They are not engineered to tell our body to create certain things in our body. These vaccines present a piece of the virus, and our immune system triggers an immune response. The mRNA vaccines are a biologically engineered entity that goes into our body and changes how our body functions. The other thing is that she talks about, and which the doctors will say too, is that we don't know what causes lymphomas. Well, we don't, but if we can do some science and show that there is a percentage increase in the presentation of lymphoma with these vaccines, well, then according to science, that would be a causal link, right? So, and then this last one, the COVID-19 vaccines benefit cancer patients. And we don't really know that. That's another assumption that the doctors have been making. We haven't really studied that, so we don't really know. So I like this article. It was well written. She did a really good job. I think what we needed to do, though, is look at some of the arguments. So when she said that there's no established link between COVID-19 vaccines and cancer, completely right. But when she wanted to use a study that uses the Hep A, the Hep B, yellow fever, and flu vaccine and compare it to the mRNA vaccine, that's not an accurate accurate comparison, because that's apples and oranges. And when she talks about, we don't know what causes lymphomas, we don't, but that's not exactly how science works, right? We don't technically have to be 100% certain. If we did, these mRNA vaccines would have never made it off the shelf, right? So, and then the benefits to cancer, well, we haven't studied that, so that's bold. I don't think we should say that yet. That's the first article. So I want to look at another one. This one's from Reuters, and this article is addressing Dr. Charles Hoff, which he is also from Canada, which I didn't realize that. And Canada is a little bit brutal when physicians speak out against these mRNA vaccines. And he's under investigation by the College of Physicians and Surgeons of British Columbia for alleged misconduct related to spreading false information about COVID-19 measures and vaccines. So that's unfortunate. But Reuters is going to use that in order to discredit Dr. Hoff. One of the things that's really nice in this article is you're going to get all the links to his interviews. And so you can go out there and listen to the interviews yourself and make a decision off of that. The last thing this article does is it identifies 5 scientists and 5 doctors and asks their opinion about something. And I'm not really sure that Reuters is asking their opinion about this situation in particular. Now, they start out with Dr. Gronville saying there's no basis for any of the things claimed here. And here's the problem. We don't know what she's referring to. And I would not read this that critically, except that I did that whole episode on the Associated Press and the mRNA and DNA connection thing. I don't know what they're referring to here, what they're saying Dr. Gigi Gronville doesn't see a connection. But if we're talking about the connection between the mRNA vaccines and cancers, well, these doctors are saying that there seems to be a correlation here that we should study more. So there's a hypothesis. And again, science starts out with a hypothesis, and then we do research to see if it's true. So that part there is a little bit misleading because how Reuters presents it, it makes you think that there was actually science that was done that proved that these vaccines do not create cancer. The next person they use is the chief of Nature's Cancer Journal. Okay. And I'm just going to skip over that because remember that huge blow up with Nature's magazine and the proximal origin of COVID? If you don't, there's an episode out here where I go over that whole thing. So we're just going to skip over Nature's because there's some questions on if they will follow the science sometimes or not when it comes to funding. After that, we see Dr. Nikki Thorpe, and Dr. Thorpe is with the Vaccine Knowledge Project, which is a branch of the Oxford University. One of the things that Dr. Thorpe notes is about the term turbocancer. Doesn't seem to be a term used in mainstream peer-reviewed literature. And I think Dr. Thorpe hits that right on the head there, because what these oncologists that have been bringing up this concept of turbocancers, what they're saying is that we need to do more research to see if there is a correlation between these turbocancers and the vaccines. So Dr. Thorpe has hit it right on the head. And I think that's the interesting point about this whole article is what these doctors are saying is factual, yet it isn't addressing the issue that these oncologists had brought up. So again, we're seeing this straw dog argument by the news media that instead of addressing their concern that we should look at doing some research to see if there is a correlation, what they're doing is they're addressing another question of, do we currently have any research that looks at if these vaccines, if these mRNA vaccines cause cancer? And right now, all the doctors are saying, no, we don't. The one thing that I didn't see in any of this commentary is I didn't see any of these doctors say we shouldn't do that research. I didn't see any of these doctors that were being used by factcheck.org or by Reuters. I didn't see them say we shouldn't do research to see if there's a link between cancers and these mRNA vaccines. They answered a question of right now, is there research that shows a connection? And they said no. So there you have it. There you have what the scientists and the doctors are saying. They're saying, hey, I'm out here in the real world and I'm practicing on people, and there's a lot of these cancers. They're pretty fast. They're rapidly growing. And so I think we should study that. And that's what I would like us to do to verify if there is a link between these vaccines and cancers. And how mainstream media presented that is, one, they tried to discredit the doctors, and then two, they put up straw dog arguments. They put up an argument which had nothing to do with what these doctors were saying. They went to, there's no facts that prove these cause cancer. And everybody agrees with that. There's no facts that prove that. That's why all these doctors are saying, hey, we should study this to see if there is a link between these vaccines and cancers. Either way, for you and I, the average person sitting out here, how mainstream media presented this was they made it sound like there wasn't a problem. They did not clarify that, there's been no study on this, and so we don't really know if these cause cancer or not. And there's a lot of information that says these might cause cancer, but we don't want to study that. And so maybe in the next episode, we'll just kind of drag ourselves through some of the science and information that's been out there that supports these scientists who want us to do more study on this to see if they cause cancer. Okay? Until next time, I'll catch you on the other side.